Anthony Edwards has shot a lot of three-pointers this season. And it's not just a normal, high-volume kind of season, it's one of the most prolific three-point frequency seasons we've ever seen. As of right now, Edwards has attempted 706 threes on the season. That's the 17th most in a season in NBA history already. At his current pace of 10 attempts per game, he's on pace to finish in the top 6 in NBA history. The good thing is that Anthony Edwards has also made a lot of three-pointers this season. He's at 17th all-time for three-point makes in a season, he's shooting 40%, and he's on track to get well inside the top 10 there as well. But for a guy who's so agile, so strong, and so fast, it does feel strange that he's this insanely high volume shooter, and the rim pressure machine we all expected him to be just isn't quite there this season. And this three-point shooting spike has come with both positive and negative implication for Edwards' game. From a very simple point of view, Edwards has traded in his mid-range game for an expanded three-point game. So far this season, the frequency of his field goals attempted from the mid-range has dropped 9%, but the frequency of his three-point attempts has gone up 14%. And that's a good thing, because he's made just 39% on the least efficient shot in basketball, the mid-range shot, in both of these past two seasons. By simply cutting some of the fat from his mid-range game and shooting more efficient shots and then making them more often, Edwards has immediately become a more effective and more dangerous scorer, but there's still some understandable frustrations with his shot selection so far this season. At times it does feel like he's jacking threes recklessly, and again that feels wrong for a player who is so explosive going to the rim. In a perfect world, Edwards is breaking the paint over and over again while still maintaining his huge three-point volume and his relatively low frequency of mid-range jumpers. But for Edwards, and with this Minnesota roster, he's just not living in that perfect world, and while I would agree with anybody who says Ant's shot selection from three can be questionable at times, I also think there's pretty obvious roster construction issues that he's fighting against here as well. I think a lot of what is driving Edwards' crazy three-point volume is the fact that it's the easiest option to take against the insane defensive coverages he faces and the defensive coverage his own offensive ecosystem forces him to face. And when that easy option is also a 40% shot from three, he over-relies on it as a bailout probably a little bit too often. Because when he's in attack mode, he's often facing a floor map like this. Randle and Gobert's man both standing in the paint, McDaniel's man standing 10 feet off him in the gaps, and that makes those driving lanes and downhill attacks a much more difficult task. So even if he can dust one of the best perimeter defenders in the world in Amen Thompson, Gobert's man is going to come across, and then McDaniel's man is going to come across as well, and it's always going to be at least a 3-on-1 proposition. When Edwards had a little more spacing and his three-point shot wasn't as prolific, I think he had to drive more and risk having these possessions where the defense just collapses in on him, but now he's trying to shoot his way out of those problems. And I don't think Minnesota's offense would actually be nearly as good if he wasn't doing that, but it does lead to some really funky shot selection issues as well. Like when he comes off this pick and sees Randle's man waiting in the gaps if he goes left, Gobert's man at the free throw line a level down, and McDaniel's man just standing at the rim, I think he seems to decide it's easier to just shoot that pull-up three, and because he makes that shot with such regularity, it's a decision that does make sense. And that, to me, feels like the root of this shooting spike. Again, when he's sizing up a big and he's got Tatum in one gap, Holiday in the other, and then Horford and White waiting at the rim, it's a pull-up three, but it certainly looks a lot worse when that shot doesn't go in. And despite the fact that the entire floor is tilted towards stopping Anthony Edwards getting to the rim, that's when it does feel like he's leaning on that three-point shot too much. I think when Ant saw this three-man wall at the rim and a big man in drop coverage here in previous seasons, he'd just back himself to slither through it somehow, but now he's just firing on that deep ball instead. Or when he had a defender he could beat off the bounce and he saw this defender coming over hard, he'd be more inclined to still attack it. But his undeniably elite shooting has become both a gift and a curse because it enables more of those questionable shots to go up. I think in a lot of ways, Ant's shooting has been born out of necessity with the spacing and the attention he's getting, but there's also times where he could use that to his team's advantage and he's not doing it enough, and that's when it does feel like an actual problem. Like, it's not ideal that teams are happy to stick Dort in the gaps and send J-Dub across to double, but Jaylen Clark has made over 40% of his threes this season, and that's the kind of read that should be simple against a defense like that. Again, he's coming down the court and already Phoenix is building this wall against him, but by doing that, they're leaving Mike Conley open in the corner, and that's when that three-point shot really does seem like a complete bailout shot. So there's a lot of context that goes into Anthony Edwards just jacking up a ton of three-point shots. His roster has too many non-shooters that play big minutes alongside Edwards, which has forced him to become more of a shooter and less of a driver, and I think it's important to remember that when he's out there hoisting shots, but it's also on him to judge when to take those shots and when to use his gravity to create better shots for his teammates. And there's no doubt that's still a work in progress for him. If you enjoyed this breakdown, you can become a Howls and Growls member. Check out the link in the pinned comment below, and thanks again for watching.